Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across this wonderful state who are working so hard to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. To my friends up in the Mississippi Delta, it's great to have you here. I mentioned this on the Outdoor Show on Monday, but I was up there this past weekend, and we got a lot done. We planted some summer plots. We sprayed some food plots. We just kind of enjoyed being out in the outdoors. I think Sunday morning it was in the 50s, like 55 degrees. But we contended with some good old Delta gumbo mud, that is for sure. But we didn't have any choice. We came up from the coast. We had to get it done, and we got it done. So it was fun just being out and about. And I have never seen so much corn everywhere, which is an indication of the markets and sort of what farmers are predicting right now. But as that corn gets up, all those roads and highways are going to feel like mazes all over the Mississippi Delta. Saw a little bit of soybeans, hardly any cotton, but lots and lots of corn. So interesting. Listen, we got a great show today. We have a friend of mine, somebody who's been on the show several times, someone I really enjoy spending time with. People from across the state will enjoy this conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross. He's a pilot for the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron out of Keesler Air Force Base. You know him as the Hurricane Hunters, and he's been doing it a long time. And we'll remind you a little bit about that here in just a second. But without any further ado, let me welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show Lieutenant Colonel Cross. I call him Sean. It's great to see you again, my friend.
Same here, Ricky. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having us on. We like to come on and talk about the mission and the men and women of the Air Force Reserve. It's always a pleasure.
You've been busy, man. I mean, you're out on the speaking trail quite a bit these days, aren't you?
Well, yeah, with the 20-year mark for Katrina, you can imagine it's been pretty, people are starting to think about it. So I just came back from Mississippi State. I was invited up there to talk for Mississippi State Insurance Day. They've been trying to get me up there for about 3 or 4 years, but it always falls on spring break for the kids here in Biloxi. So we made it happen this year. Went up there, and I was about 300 people. I spent the day with them. Really a lot of great feedback, a lot of great people. And I listened to some of their speakers talk about the insurance industry. So it was really, really interesting to be a part of that. And I've got another one coming up later on this summer. The National Fire Marshals Convention is going to be here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So that about 500 or 600 people are expecting for that. We've got Media Day tomorrow. So we've got about 8 different media outlets coming out to the squadron. I'm going to give them my big, I call it the dog and pony brief. It's really a lot of frills and stuff, and it's a big wow moment. It takes about 45 minutes. We go all through the history of the mission and everything and talk about where we are today and how we're handling it and current storms that we've flown. So it's a lot of fun. I'll be on the radio with you and then some other outlets across the coast as we go through the month. So it's a busy time.
Yeah, listen, I'm really it's unfortunate I have shows to do when that is happening, but it's a great opportunity for you guys to reach out and, just to continue to educate people about the importance of this particular weather reconnaissance mission at Keesler. And but at some point, I'm sure that we'll work through the details. But I look forward to riding with you guys out into a storm at some point. I think that's a great opportunity. And with you guys being here, something I probably should have done a long time ago, given I've been in media for so darn long. But and hopefully I get to do it with you, because that would be icing on the cake for me. Yeah. So listen, what I like about you is, first of all, you live here. You care deeply about this place, but you have a long history of flying into storms. So why don't we remind people a little bit about your background, because I can understand why you're sought after speaker, because you've seen some of the biggest storms we've ever experienced, and it makes for a really compelling presentation. I'm sure that people are spellbound by your sense of mission. In a way, you're a celebrity. You've been on all the major channels, and people tend to know your face. You tend to be a spokesperson. You've shared a lot over these years, but give people a sense of that.
So it all started for me, if I go all the way back 36 years ago. I mean, when I right out of high school, I walked off the stage, gave the recruiter my diploma, and away I went and got started as an enlisted member, worked my way up into the flying regime as a commissioned officer. But I got started here with the Hurricane Hunters in March of 2001. And I've been with this squadron ever since then. So 25 years. This is my 25th storm season. I can't even tell you, how many thousands of hours I've got. It's over 5,000. I quit tracking, which is not a lot compared to, like airline pilots and things like that. But, to be an Air Force guy with that amount of time in a C-130, that's a pretty good bit of flying over the years. As far as penetrations of major hurricanes, I've got 176 penetrations of major storms. So that's a pretty good amount of times going in and out of one of these, beastie hurricanes. So there's a lot of times you get rocked and rolled. Some of them have been benign, but some of them you get rocked around pretty good. They're all different. They all have their own unique personality. So you have to always be ready for the unexpected, because you don't know what curveball Mother Nature's going to throw at you, Ricky. I mean, I teach these young kids coming back, like, look, yesterday you made a pass and it was nothing to it. And you're like, this is no big deal. But tomorrow it could be completely different. So you have to be ready.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I refer to you guys as heroes. You understand the weight of what you're doing as you're collecting this important data. We'll talk more about the importance of that data, like wind speed and pressures, especially pressures and temperature and all these things that you're gathering when you're going through those storms. But it never exit your mind the importance of what you're doing, and what you're doing is feeding into the National Hurricane Center and will save lives. You're fully aware of that from the moment you take off to the time you land again, how critical your information is to the whole process of warning people and helping people understand what's coming.
Yeah, it's a giant collaborative effort between a lot of people. So the wing itself, there's over 1,600 reservists. All right, there's about 400 full-time people, and the rest are part-time. And we've actually got a 4-day drill weekend right now. So today is drill day for all of us, and they're all out there at the squadron working and across the wing. And it takes everybody in that wing to pull this off. So you can imagine all of those people just to launch aircraft, right, to make our mission be successful. But then we have a customer, and that customer is the National Hurricane Center in Miami. So if they called us today with a request showing we want the squadron to go look at it, and they don't direct it to me, but it's to the unit, they'll say, we want you to go look out in this suspected area out in the Gulf. Okay, fine. We will put a crew in a crew rest, and 16 hours later, they'll be airborne to go investigate that area. And it starts off as a low-level invest, possibly mission, and we're down there flying around at 500 feet above the surface. We'll do that for a certain amount of hours, and what we're doing is we're looking for closed circulation at the surface. If we got it, then we'll climb up to higher altitude and we'll fly to fixed mission. That's when we're tracking the storm. We want to see where the lowest center of pressure is. If we're going to establish it by latitude and longitude, that's where the winds drop to absolute zero. So, and we're in constant communication with the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, because we've got a satellite uplink on the aircraft. So the request can be real time. They can let us know what they want. If they want us to change patterns and stay in the northeast quadrant and look over here, or if they want us to, fly south of the storm and then turn due north and take it all the way till it makes landfall. So we can satisfy those requirements in the air at any time. And they let us know. They'll send a request the day before where we think the storm is. We'll come in and brief 16 hours later. Well, obviously the storm's moved. They'll give us updated coordinates. We're talking back and forth with those guys, and then we get airborne. And then again, you've got a few hours down the road because you're flying to get to it. So they're sending us new updated coordinates. We used to be called the Hurricane Hunters because you'd have to go out and hunt these things. They were way back in the day, in older aircraft, and they'd fly these large tracks across open bodies of water, and they're searching these low areas of pressure. Well, now with the advent of satellites, we know exactly where it's at. So we're going to use radar to get to the center. But once we start to penetrate the eye wall, that's when we're not really using radar. Now we're hunting that lowest center of pressure. And it can happen really fast, or it could take a minute or two, depending on how large the eye is. It could be as small as a couple of miles or stretched out to 20 miles across. So that's when we're really having to steer to find that center.
What's really cool is, as you know, I'm a tropical weather nerd, and so we're able to literally, from the moment you take off at Keesler Air Force Base, we're able to track you all the way to the storm, watch your passes into the storm, be able to see the barometric pressure. We're able to get the the sea surface temperature or sea surface wind speeds that you guys are measuring. It's amazing how technology converges as you guys work with the other airplanes that are flying in the upper atmosphere, some that are flying out ahead of the storm to get a sense of the atmosphere ahead of it. It is as you say, it's really an orchestra. It's a very coordinated orchestra that feeds critical information into the National Hurricane Center. When we come back with Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross from the Hurricane Hunters here at Keesler, we're going to talk about, we've got some early information. We don't have, as we get closer to the Hurricane Center, we'll get a little bit more focused. But some of the at least current information about the main development region is that the sea surface temperatures are cooler than they were this time last year. That's always good to see. And there are lots of other things to talk about. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with someone who I call a hero, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross, who's a hurricane hunter pilot for the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. And he's been doing it since 2001. That's a lot. He's seen a whole bunch in a very short period in a long period of time. Sean, one of the things I wanted to mention to you, you said it earlier, but you were talking about the large team that is necessary to make this squadron work. And what people may not realize is that, let's say, for example, you fly a lot out of Keesler for sure, but when storms are deep into the Atlantic, you actually are going to pre-position into the Caribbean. Also, when there's a possibility that Biloxi could be threatened, you have to relocate. So this team is not just operating from its base station, but it's got to be ready to move and go, in some cases, deep into the Atlantic, which then means you guys are flying oftentimes night missions out into the middle of the Atlantic from one of those islands. It's the mission is way bigger than the Gulf of Mexico or Keesler, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very large. We have 10 aircraft, so we've got 20 crews, 10 part-time, 10 full-time crews to handle this. So the agreement there, the handshake with the Department of Commerce that was written many years ago, is we can fly 3 different storms at one time. That could be 3 different locations. So it is not that far off to have 3 aircraft in Hawaii, 3 aircraft at Keesler, and 3 down in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands operating 3 different storms at one time. Now, you were kind of alluding to the fluidness of all of this, and we have to be very mobile, and we are. Really, all we need is a runway and a cell phone signal and internet signal, and we can operate from anywhere in the world. We've ran the operation out of a hotel room many times. It's not that difficult to do as far as from that aspect. So, if that phone goes off right now and they say we're looking at something way out in the Atlantic, we can pack up and head down to St. Croix. We'll load up 3 aircraft with maintenance, support staff, and the extra crews to do it. It's about 65 people. I call it the traveling road show. If you've ever heard my briefing, I touch on this, and that's how I allude to it. So we'll go down to St. Croix. We've got a hangar there at the St. Croix Henry Rolson International Airport. That's a little small warehouse that we lease annually. And what we do is this week we'll be rolling out. We call it the rollout trip. We will pre-position parts to sustain that 24/7 life cycle throughout the season. So when we head down there, we've got everything that we need to operate around the clock and continue flying whatever storm. Because as a wave, as they're looking at it in Africa, when it rolls off, we'll start picking it up at 52.5 degrees west. And you can look on the globe and the maps and see how far out that is. So with that requirement and request from the National Hurricane Center, we don't have the endurance on the aircraft to fly from Biloxi, Mississippi, all the way there, and then be in the storm environment for 5 hours, because that's usually how long we're there. So if we're in the environment for 5 hours, a lot of our missions are 10.5, 11, 12.5 hours long. It depends on how far away it is from land. So, that puts us, 3.5 hours to get there, 5 hours in a storm, 3.5 hours back. It's easy to see how we can do 12 hours. So they're very long. The missions can be grueling, especially if you take off in the evening, watch the sun go down, watch the sun come back up. That's really hard on the body. And that's why we take third pilots. We have a bunk up on the flight deck so we can cycle through just to, stay refreshed and stuff. Because, man, let me tell you, when you're out there in the middle of the night, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, Ricky, and you're way out in the Atlantic, there's nobody out there. It's just us, and we're out there in the middle of this storm flying in and out of there. I can tell you, I've said it, and I'm sure a lot of other crew members have asked themselves, man, what am I doing out here at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of this hurricane? But we know there's a huge need for the data, and we're all very dedicated to it. And it's all about, pulling the data from the storm and getting it to the National Hurricane Center in Miami so these guys can make a really tight forecast. Because when it comes to forecasting evacuation calls, the difference in one county or the other is huge. And the amount of savings, when you're talking about over $1 million plus and coastline evacuation costs per mile, I mean, you can see why the emergency management officials are so tuned in to this forecast, and they want to know where that cone's going if there's a shift. And that comes from those experts down in Miami. I mean, those guys are the best in the world at doing this. That's where the supercomputer is that builds that big model and that forecast code.
It is amazing when you compare the track record of the National Hurricane Center compared to some of the major models. They have performed extraordinarily well. And now we have AI becoming part of the whole thing. That's going to get better and better. Some of those models performed pretty good last year, but they feed more information into them because it's a mix of climatology, which is a storm in a similar position, the same atmospheric conditions that happened 10 years ago. How did it perform compared to what this storm might do? Including all of the dynamics of this current storm, how it's going to form, where it's going to form, where it might go. You add this historical data together with the actual data of the storm, and you really begin to get some clarity about some possibility. And they've really gotten good at it, haven't they, Sean?
Yeah, they have. And part of my briefing that I always tell people is I'll show the cone, and then the next slide is how the cone widens if we're not out there. And I'll always brief the same thing. I'm sure there's some people listening that have heard my briefing. We used to say that we would improve the forecast by 25 to 30%. Well, now it's 10 to 20%. It's not that we're doing a worse job. It's just that the model has become so tighter, the forecast building. And because there's so much data that has been put into these models over the decades, they've just got more and more information to pull from. We give them an anchor point. Here's where we got started. Here's where the storm is. Here's where the lowest center of pressure. And they look at things that have happened in the past as opposed to what's going on right now. I'm looking at the screen, anywhere from 77 to 80 degrees sea surface temperatures in the Gulf. So as we go on through the weeks here, that's going to warm up. And then they're going to have the ingredients they need for a storm to build, just like Katrina did when she came off the tip of Florida. It's my famous story. I was right there waiting on her. And we knew she was going to develop. We knew it was going to happen. I mean, just based on what we've seen in the past. I couldn't make the forecast because I'm just a pilot, but I knew the Gulf was warm. I just didn't know she was going to blow up into what she did. That's not my job. That's the guys down in Miami to make that call. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary. I don't want to jump into it too quick. We got some more talking.
No, we can mention that. So one of the interesting things about Katrina is that we learned a lot from Katrina. A lot of things changed about Katrina. For example, a lot of the models had it going into the Florida Panhandle for a pretty good period of time, even as recent. The storm hit on Monday, so on Friday, still some of the models had it going into Florida, and then they started to shift slowly but surely. And people in Mississippi and Louisiana for a period of time were thinking, well, it's not going to be our storm, and then in a very short period of time, it became our storm. And so what happened after that, two things happened after Katrina. One is they really focused on doubling down to improve the accuracy of the landfall and give as much pre-warning as possible. And the other is, as it relates to storm surge, it completely changed the entire dynamics. Used to, storm surge was based on the category of the storm. But as we learned from Hurricane Katrina, that was once a 5 and a very large storm out in the Gulf of Mexico. Once it came back to a 3 when it made landfall, the size of the storm meant, and because it had been a very dangerous category 5 at one point, it was just driving so much water behind it. And so major changes happened as it relates to the storm surge modeling. It was too bad it couldn't have happened before Hurricane Katrina, but the reality is we learned a lot from that storm. One other point you said is it came out of the Florida Everglades. It didn't lose a lot of steam crossing, and then it made that dip. That dip actually is what changed the trajectory of it. As you well know, you change 1 or 2 clicks on on a compass, and it changes where the trajectory is going to take it in a big way. That dip put us in play in a big way. But a lot of the folks were saying, man, it was the Gulf at that moment was literally a cauldron. Just everything, the conditions were incredible. If you remember, we didn't have a lot of shear. Sea surface temperatures were high. Man, that storm just came into literally the perfect scenario for us, didn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah, it was. I've got the satellite shots. You can look at them online and stuff and see. And I'll say the same words every time I brief this. I've been giving the same briefing for decades now. And it is a textbook example of a very powerful Category 5 when you see it from space. And you mentioned a little small shift. I mean, look, a wobble right here, can change the landfall position 150 miles away. I mean, so it could be miles, and miles make a huge difference. I mean, hey, a quarter mile makes a big difference depending on where you live and if you're a low-lying area. So they've really learned a lot, and we all went through it growing up here, living here, and the changes in the insurance industry and what we're experiencing now across the country all the way into Florida are all driven by Katrina. Katrina was the benchmark for that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we learned a lot. She's become a measurement in time for a lot of things for us, because there was life before the storm and after the storm. And before the storm, it was a lot cheaper. It's a lot more expensive now. But we're learning a lot.
We'll talk about this on the other side. But one of the benefits to us, it was a negative for sure that we had to build higher. But what we did after Hurricane Katrina, because of that world record or that United States record storm surge that hit here, it meant we were building higher. We were rebuilding infrastructure stronger. We are, Zeta was a good test of some of this. We were, we rebuilt in a way that made us much more resilient. And other communities like Tampa, for example, if they get that direct hit, they didn't get it. We thought they were going to get it. They still haven't gotten it. Oh my gosh, major changes will happen after that. But when we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the hurricane hunters as we continue our conversation. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We have Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross. He's a pilot with the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron at Keesler Air Force Base. He's part of the hurricane hunters, and he's been doing it since 2001. And he has stories to tell for sure. Listen, we'll come back to Katrina here shortly, but one of the things that, we did learn a lot from Katrina, but we continue to learn a lot from all the storms. It was interesting that you spoke at an insurance meeting, because we talk about insurance here on this show a lot. I had the pleasure to have insurance executives, among them, for example, Frank Bordeaux, who joins me, and we talk about the latest. I think the average person doesn't fully understand that the insurance market tends to play out on a global scale. So what we do locally in terms of building codes, building higher, those kinds of things to mitigate risk, which we did in Mississippi. What we did in Mississippi to create what's called the wind pool, which is a terrific backstop, one of the most successful wind pool programs in America. These things that were all part of Katrina for us, helping us build back stronger and so on, help us as it relates to rates. But a big event could happen in Europe, or it could happen somewhere else in the world that could really drive up the risk factor for the reinsurance company. Reinsurance company are the companies that insurance companies go to get their insurance. So I wish we could say that we had total control in Mississippi with insurance rates, but it doesn't work that way. What we do have control over is hardening. Now, what's happening, as you mentioned, Tampa, if Tampa is a worst case scenario in the Gulf of Mexico right now, if we were to get a direct hit, you can comment about that. We didn't get it. It was close, but it didn't happen. Ironically, the impacts of storms that came out of the Gulf went way inland to North Carolina and Tennessee and places like that, where the impact was incredible. And so now we're actually having conversations in the insurance arena about hardening far inland in ways that used to be just a coastal hardening conversation. But it's amazing how these different personalities of storms have really guided, you saw it at that insurance meeting, but guided, industries like the insurance industry to maybe rethink how they think about whether you live on the coast or not on the coast. Now it seems very clear that you can have impacts be far inland.
Oh, yeah, for sure. that last year really changed a lot of things up in the North Carolina mountains. What's really interesting is one of our former pilots who retired, he lived right up the river from me here on the Chutica Buff. And, he was wiped out in Katrina, bought that house I think it was 6 weeks before Katrina, lost everything. Well, he's living in the North Carolina mountains. He just got wiped out up there. So he's like, I said, Travis, where are you moving to next? I'm not going there. So they're feeling things that, we never would have expected to happen. So a tremendous amount of rain. And look, you're dealing with rainfall. You're dealing with storm surge on the coast. Okay, that's what kills so many people. But the rain that moves inland after one of these storms can be catastrophic. And it was the perfect storm. It lined up in the Carolina mountains. And, if you're down in a valley, that's where the water is going to end up. And the flooding risk. And it was absolutely horrible to see all of that unfold in the Carolina mountains, what those people have gone through. They weren't ready for it. I feel for them. We can put out the forecast in a cone down here, but that was just the perfect storm. That really made a mess up there.
One of the things I'm writing a book, actually, the book actually started with a discussion about life lessons learned from Katrina, but it's evolved into a bigger book, really focusing on how to overcome life storms, and Katrina certainly being one of them. But we learned a lot from Katrina about what is in the heart and soul of Mississippians. And there's a lot to learn from that lesson. You, as a hurricane hunter, you personally experienced the storm itself from a personal perspective. You also got to witness some of the most amazing, how neighbor came to help neighbor in politics and race, and nothing mattered. It was an equal opportunity destroyer. But the life lessons we learned, I'm trying to capture that so that if a storm hits somewhere in Tennessee and they really weren't paying attention to what happened here on the coast, they would have something they could refer to that would give them a sense of, you'll still find hope. Human beings, as a general rule, are incredibly resilient people. But, man, there was a lot to learn from Katrina, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, Ricky, we're still learning from it. We're 20 years ago, you ride down the beach and there's still, vacant lots. So I tell people when I talk to them across the country or wherever they're at, I'm like, look, I talk to them from, this is Sean talking to whoever it is. I said, forget about what I do. I'm just telling you, this is a life-changing experience, and there's no quick rebuild to this. It's going to become a measurement in time for you. There's life before the storm and after the storm, and it will take decades and decades to get back to whatever close to it was before. Now, down here on the coast, we've rebuilt. We've done a lot of amazing things, but we lost that old school charm that we had with the homes on 90 and the trees and things like that. 90 was just ripped up. Water mains look like pretzels afterwards, so it's different every time. But the one thing that is always the same is the resiliency of the people that live in those communities, and how you and I watched people just band together no matter who it was. I can remember cars being backed up on I-10 trying to get gas. There's a guy in a lawn chair playing a guitar, just entertaining people. We didn't have anything else to do, It was crazy. Yeah. So it's just it's amazing to watch people come together.
Well, I'm wondering if there's any part of your presentation that deals with Keesler Air Force Base itself. The inundation that Keesler took on, how it was challenged and how it turned around and got back up. So, relatively speaking, I know lots had to be rebuilt and all of that, but it's a training center, man. It was the base for the hurricane hunters. It's incredible to think about how impacted Keesler Air Force Base was, and the leadership it took to get it back up and running, and to becoming what we see there today. And you experienced every bit of that, didn't you?
Oh yeah, that was an amazing rebuild. We went from evacuating for the storm to not coming back with the flying mission until November. We were basically kicked off the base. Not in a bad way or anything. It's just that there was so much damage. I think the estimates were right at $1 billion of damage. Every building was damaged to some extent. They had students that they were just blessing them, graduating them early, and just sending them on to the next assignment because they didn't have anywhere to house these people. Instructors, their houses were damaged. Every house was torn down after Katrina on Keesler housing and rebuilt brand new. So what does that tell you right there? That was a huge growth event after the storm. So we didn't come back to November. The Marines owned the base. I mean, basically the 3-star general rolled into town and he said, okay, whoever's in charge of Keesler, I'll let you know what I need. I've got control now, because he had recovery efforts that he had to take care of. And that's the way things work in the military. You know, somebody comes in, I'm now in charge. Okay, I'll let you know what I need. And that's a true story. We operated out of Marietta, Georgia, all the way till November and came back. So we continued to fly all of those flights in that deadly 2005 season, which we went beyond the named storms, and we went into Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta, you know, just to keep going. That was a crazy season that we were all a part of.
Quick little side story. My son Justin was going to Nativity Elementary at the time, and when they finally got back opened again, it was interesting because to get to the elementary school, you had to go through a sea of debris that had been parted. So, you know, in other words, it was just like going through a tunnel to get to the school. And the Navy used it as barracks at night. The school, the Nativity Elementary at night. And what they would do in the daytime is they would convert it back to classrooms. The kids would go to class. They would often eat together in the cafeteria. And over a period of time, the kids got close to some of the Navy guys. And so when it was time for the Navy to depart and go wherever they went, it was a sad day for the kids. I remember my son crying when the Navy guys left. But, I mean, there's so many micro stories like that and so many different corners of the place where, I mean, you find your new normal and people are touched in special ways. You just could go on and on. But the military played such a great role in that recovery effort. I mean, I just can't. The CBs and the role that you guys play. My gosh, it's lots will continue to be written about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a life-changing experience, and I mean, you remember like the days right after. It was like a war zone down here. There's helicopters flying everywhere, tankers coming into Gulfport, bringing in relief supplies, relief sites set up that were run by the military all over the place. It was crazy, you know. And when it was happening, there was the security forces on Keesler Air Force Base. They were in the Humvees or the big trucks riding around base. And there's actual footage I have of it on audio. And these guys I think it might be on YouTube. And they're talking about where's all this water coming in. They weren't ready for this because, you know, the debris line stopped at the tracks pretty much, right? Everything pushed and around Irish Hill, everything backed up and built up right there. Well, Keesler is protected behind the railroad tracks. Well, they couldn't figure out where the water was coming in. Well, everybody who's been down here, Biloxi's on a peninsula. We're surrounded by water on 3 sides. And on Keesler, all drains lead to the bay. So it's like a giant bathtub, and it backed up. And part of my briefing is I show the picture of the center of Keesler Air Force Base, about 2 feet of water. And the building is still there today. You can measure it. You can look at it and see. You know, it's really wild.
Yeah, Governor Haley Barbour used to say this often, that MEMA pre-positioned a lot of supplies in coastal Mississippi, but they couldn't imagine what we were going to have in terms of the surge. And a lot of the pre-positioned supplies was destroyed. And so, you know, like the 3rd or 4th day after Katrina, the headline in the Sun Herald read, "Help us now," because we had seen for 3 or 4 days a lull. But man, when the National Guard and everybody started showing up, things started happening really rapidly. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation about hurricane hunters and Hurricane Katrina specifically. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. So much to learn, so much to talk about with someone like Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross from the Hurricane Hunters at Keesler, who's been doing it since 2001. Listen, we're going to get back together again as we get closer to the season. We'll talk even more about all of this. You know, someone asked me, I made a note of it after we talked the last time. It was toward the end of last year. Someone sent me a note and they said, tell me a time. I'd like to know a time when like downdrafts or a memorable storm, turbulence, you know, were the bumps worth it? I mean, someone was very curious about it. If you had to pick one, what was it? What was that one that you went, whoa, that was brutal?
I need more than 6 minutes, but I can cover it. It was her. I tell you, the landfall missions in the Gulf have always been the most memorable, whether it was Ivan back in 2004 or Michael in 2018. And look, I'm going to help you out right here. So here's the airplane, right? So I got to play with the camera a little bit. So it's the winds are always coming from our left side. So the turbulence is extreme. You know, we're feeling updrafts and downdrafts. But in Michael, it got so intense the aircraft sort of did one of these things where when the autopilot kicked off, the aircraft just rolled heavy to the right. And at the same time, okay, we weather vaned into the eye wall, so we turned into the oncoming winds, and then when the nose dropped 20 degrees. So, and this was all really instantaneous when this happened. So this was some extreme turbulence that we experienced in Michael. It had just gone through a rapid intensification right before we made that fourth penetration. And when we broke through that eye wall, we could see the surface. We could see the beach at Mexico Beach. We could see the surge pushing over the trees from 10,000 feet. So it was quite remarkable. But I can tell you that was the roughest ride we've ever experienced. Anybody who was on board tells you it was. And part of my presentation, when I do this show, then the event that I go around town and do, I show 3 videos. Okay, and the first aspect is my GoPro from the front that's looking out the front of the aircraft. You can see the massive torrential rainfall coming down. The second aspect is WGNO out of New Orleans. They're standing right behind me, and so they're filming the fury that's going on inside the flight deck when we're, flying the plane and breaking through this. You can hear everything going haywire. And then the third aspect is the third pilot was sitting on a bunk, and he's videoing with his cell phone, and it shows how we got into the negative G when the nose rolled over on the aircraft, and the cameraman from WGNO went up in the air about 15 inches. So it's a chance for us, or me, when I'm giving a presentation, to bring the viewer into the aircraft and see exactly what we're experiencing. And I can tell you what we're going through as crew members, because as we broke through that eye wall and the aircraft rolled and we weather vaned and went nose down, there was a lot happening right there. The co-pilot did a phenomenal job. He was flying. I'm like the mayor on board. I'm watching and listening everything as the aircraft commander. So, I'm literally, my left eye, I can see we're hung on the eye wall, and the clear part is to our right. I'm watching the co-pilot to make sure he's flying the aircraft correctly. I'm listening to the navigator saying, we need to come right. I'm like, yeah, trust me, I know that. I know we need to come right. But we have a handful of airplane at this moment. We've got to do the most important thing, and that's just keep the aircraft flying. And the aircraft, the stall recovery or anything, the C-130 is spectacular. They really designed this aircraft well when they did it back in the 50s. You've got this huge blow-in wing with these turboprop engines pushing out 18,000 shaft horsepower. And the way to right the aircraft is you just push throttles. You just firewall it. And it generates immediate lift over the wing because you've got the propeller, which is encompassing the entire wing. So the aircraft is spectacular. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. So, we ride it, and then we turn back into the eye and we do our business. And then there's some soul searching inside the eye. It's like, ooh, that was really rough.
I can only
we just
imagine.
went through a 10-second pocket, but hey, we got to go back through this. We got to get back out, and we're following this pressure gradient. We actually descended 2,000 feet into the eye. That's not a quick drop, but we have to follow this pressure gradient because that's what the forecasters want. They want to know what's going on at 10,000 feet pressure altitude. So we descended 2,000 feet into the eye. And then we got to climb back out. And let me tell you, when we went back out that eye wall on the other side, we had those engines firewalled. Those motors were screaming, and we were barely climbing up that 2,000-foot climb. It was very, very slow to get back to where we needed to be to exit the storm. It was a quiet ride on the way home. I tell you, it was only 45 minutes.
That is incredible. Hey, so Sean, at what altitude did you make that penetration?
90% or greater, all flown at 10,000 feet. When they're first developing, they may want us at 2,500 feet or 5,000. But at any time, the aircraft commander, if he feels it or she feels that there's an unsafe situation, we'll climb up to higher altitude. So the bulk of them are flown at 10,000 feet.
So you got room to make corrections.
Yeah, because you got a powerful storm. You're at 10,000, you descend to 8,000. So there's a difference in that pressure gradient. So you don't want to be at 5,000 and then descend to 3,000. So you want to be as high as you can, but you can't come over the top. They're in the 40,000 range. We just don't have that performance. And the information is needed right at 10,000 feet. That's why we penetrate the belly of the beast, as I call it, right there. And that's where we feel all of the intense weather.
We're already out of time, but another storm, Hurricane Michael, that rapid intensification was unbelievable. We learned something from every storm that had its own personality for sure. I can't wait to have you back, Sean. We'll continue these conversations. But this has been Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross from the Hurricane Hunters at Keesler Air Force Base. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Always, Ricky. Thanks for having us on. We'll be more than happy to come back in a couple of weeks.
I can't wait. I can't wait to have you back for sure. Hey, listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.